Okay. So, just make sure my monitors are muted. Yes. I undid all the stuff that I did the other day to kind of show off a few mixing techniques because we're just going to kind of start from scratch. So all we've done so far is the basic routing. And first things first, all I'm going to do is listen through the entire song and do my best to listen as critically as I can. And all I'm going to be doing is making a few minor adjustments. Also let me turn Keycaster on. Oops. Sorry about this. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to listen through the song. And I'm sorry if I obsessively check the YouTube feed, but sometimes my internet crashes and I want to stay on top of that. It's also how I stay on top of any comments that people have. Okay, so let's go ahead and listen. Yeah, Tara, that's a compressor on my 2 bus. And yes, this song is pretty cool. Uh, yeah, I almost always use a compressor on my 2 bus to just kind of overall glue the song together, but also to kind of force my hand in maintaining proper gain staging. Because if I use the faders to push up anything too loud while I have this compressor on my 2 bus, it's going to start negatively impacting the whole mix and just unbalancing everything. Because if for example, if I push the lead vocals up too loud, then the rest of the mix will start getting more compressed by these lead vocals. The more I do that, so it's kind of checks and balances in a way, and it also kind of makes the song sound a little bit better. I'm gonna replace this with a different compressor. Let me move this out of the way so I'm not blasting plosive so much. Check. Hello. Okay, that's better. Ba ba pp. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna replace this with a different compressor later that I like the character of a little bit better, but for now I'm just gonna leave that the way it is. Good question though. Okay, so if you notice, I brought up a little notes page, and this is going to be sort of I'm just going to make notes of things that I want to change in the mix up here. So my first note is just that the drums are kind of boring sounding. Everything in this song is pretty like spacey and interesting sounding, and then the drums are just kind of a drum kit. So I kind of want to do something with the drums to make them more exciting. Another issue that I'm hearing is nope, not reminders, notes. Is that the percussion is like really dry sounding. So that's a problem that I'm going to want to try and fix. The bass, and I'm just kind of going left and right and thinking about what I heard when I was listening through that. The bass in the intro bass, I would like to have it feel really heavy and have a lot of sub information there, but then in the rest of the song, probably not have as much of that. Because the intro is pretty different for the rest of the song, and I want to have the bass really tucked out of the way and be more of a feeling. Than like a noticeable melody or anything like that. But I'm going to need to switch that because the rest of the song, I want it to sound like a normal bass guitar. There was one part with the guitars that I think would sound really good with some automated delay. I think like at the beginning of these chords. That is going to sound really cool. Having be like that. Delay on guitar 1. Last half of song. Check the comments. Yeah, Nate, when I go out and I switch the 2-bus compressor for one that I like better, I'll talk about setting that up more. But for now, just to show you what my settings are on it, because the settings, the basic principle is going to remain the same. So it has a kind of soft knee, really, really low ratio. So I'm using 1.5 to 1 ratio, which is a really low compressor ratio. So it's not really doing that much. Slower attack. You don't want too fast of an attack because then it'll grab onto percussion instruments more than other things. And a slow-ish release as well. really quick attack and release times will sound more exaggerated and not really as good. So we want to be careful about that. And I don't have any makeup gain. And all I'm shooting for is like 3 decibels of gain reduction at the most when I'm setting my threshold. So when it's working, it looks a little bit like this. Okay, so that's what it sounds like with it on, with it off. It's probably not going to sound that much different, to be honest, but I'll just show you the A-B comparison. So that's off. On. Okay, so that's the difference. It's pretty subtle, and it's supposed to be subtle. This is not supposed to be a super exaggerated sound. We're not going for something that is going to really like shape the tonal quality of the mix. We're mostly just going for something that's gluing it all together just a little bit. Not sure if there's any other questions. Yeah, I've found making this little list here is very effective in just organizing the way that you're working on stuff, because then you can kind of go through and troubleshoot all of those issues that we're hearing. I think the guitar... I want those like instrumental section guitar parts to sound a lot bigger. So we'll mess around with different ways. I always misspell guitar. I don't know why. I'm like guitar. Keyboards. Again, like that chorus part needs to be really like big and powerful sounding. So chorus keys should also be big. Okay. What else we got? Vibes, space vibes, but we'll get to that. Vocals. Vocals are going to be a big one because this song has really simple vocals, and a lot of times it's nice to have extra harmonies and extra layers of vocals to be able to pull width into a track when you need it. And this doesn't really have the option to do that naturally. So we're going to have to futz around and figure out ways to make, to artificially add depth to the vocals. So we're going to need to add depth to vocals. overall, especially in key moments. Because when you listen to professional mixes, one of the biggest takeaways that I always get is how much work they put into the vocals and making the vocals dynamic, even if the parts are not dynamic. And they do that by adding layers and adding stereo width to certain parts or adding special effects to certain parts. So we're going to want to do that with this song, just because by itself the vocals are very plain. There's only one backing vocal track, and most of the time it's a response. See, it's only in one part of the song, so we're gonna need to fudge it a little bit, as they say. And those are my main general notes for just like that quick listen through of what I have so far. Okay. So first things first, just because I'm a drummer and I think about drums all the time and I love making drums sound really cool. It's my favorite. I always start with the drums when I'm mixing. But it depends. Everybody's a little bit different. A lot of people start with the lead vocal. But for me, especially with a song like this, I kind of need the context of the rest of the song before I start working on the vocals to figure out which parts I'm going to add that like extra flavor to. So I'll probably work on the lead vocal second, actually, after the drums. But first off, let's start with drums. I don't like the kick sound in this recording. It feels like kind of basketball-y, especially with the rhythm that the drummer is playing. So we're going to have to mess with that a little bit. So that's what the kick drum sounds like. Raw. There's quite a bit of bleed from the other instruments. First things first, I'm just going to put on my basic EQ3, and we're going to do some filtering and some surgical EQ to just kind of fix a little bit of trouble areas. Actually, I'm going to switch to a different EQ because I want to do one of my favorite tricks for you. This is just the Waves HEQ that comes with the H series bundle. It's nothing fancy. It does have a nice graphical readout, though. So, when I hit play, it actually shows me the frequency response of what's happening. One quick note on EQs like this, though, that do show you this frequency response, don't EQ purely based on that. And honestly, I actually recommend using a EQ when you're just starting to learn EQ. I recommend that you use an EQ that doesn't have this graphical overlay so that you are EQing purely based on what you're hearing, not necessarily what you're seeing, because sound is really about what you hear, not what you see. We don't, unless you have synesthesia, you don't see sound waves. So I recommend using something like the default plugin that comes in Pro Tools to just like learn and get a better sense. But this one has the ability to create a resonant peak with the high pass filter. And it's a pretty cool effect because it allows us to simultaneously tighten up and cut out ultra low frequencies from the kick drum that don't necessarily need to be there, and boost right at the point above where the filter starts cutting out sound. So you can see that the curve has a little hump there right at that transition point. And that's good because we can find where the fundamental note of that kick drum is by moving this around and using our ears to hear when the kick drum has like kind of the most thump to it. So that adds a bit of like extra weight to the kick drum while also sort of tightening it up a little bit. Next, I hear like this weird like sound every time the kick drum hits, and I really don't like that. So I'm going to try and find that. I'm going to try and track that down and remove it. This digital 2 setting in here kind of works the same as the basic Pro Tools EQ. So I'm just moving this around really slowly and trying to listen for where that resonance is coming for in the kick drum. It sounds like that's it right there. You notice that like horrible, horrible sound. So we're going to go ahead and cut that. I'm going to widen this a little bit. We have to be careful with this though, because if I take out too much here, it'll totally remove the like body of the kick drum sound. Like that also sounds horrible. So we're just trying to tame it a little bit. Okay. There's also a little bit of gross kind of boxiness in the mid-range. Yeah, so that's kind of my starting point with the kick drum. It, essentially just tightening up the sound a little bit. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is the hits on this are pretty inconsistent. So I want to compress this, but I know that if I compress this, it's going to bring up the noise floor and the bleed from the cymbals and the snare drum. So I'm going to add a gate to this. This is the standard one that comes with Pro Tools. Works fine. With most percussive instruments, you want to set the attack to the fastest setting, like just right off the bat. Okay, and I'm purposefully making the release time really fast. I'm going to get rid of the hold time. Just so I can hear exactly how this is working, and then I'll kind of adjust this later to make it sound more natural. this is my gate settings, because I want to reduce that bleed, but I don't want it to sound really unnatural and overly gated, because to me that this song doesn't really sound like that. It has kind of a nice organic feel to it. And with a really fast kick drum pattern like that, it can sound really weird if you do that. So I have the range turned down just a little bit, so it's only reducing by 10 decibels when the gate's closed. So it's not a heart gate. This is what's called an expander, essentially. Okay. Next, I want to kind of level out this kick drum sound because the double hits that the drummer is doing, the do are not very even. So I want to do what I can to kind of make the overall kick drum sound more consistent, and I'm going to do that with the compressor here. So I'm using a relatively fast attack time here, quick release time, because I just want to grab the peaks of the kick drum signal and pull them down a little bit so it's a little bit more in line with what the rest of the kick sound is doing. It's hard to play doubles like that on kick drum for a whole song and have them really consistent. So I'm not saying that they're a bad drummer. They're a good drummer. It's just something hard to do. And you can see here on my meter that we have a much more consistent level here. Okay. And then I'm going to add another thing. Getting crazy with this. One of my favorite compressors to add a little bit of kind of extra slap to the kick drum. So I'm going to do slowest attack time, fastest release time. And then we're going to so we've gone from this that, which does, granted, sound a little bit weirder. Let's add a little bit of low end here. But in the context of the drums, let's hear how it sounds with the whole thing. So that's without the processing. That's a little bit too much compression for me. But we've essentially just worked on really tightening up that kick drum sound. Because before it was very sloppy and not very distinct, just in general. So that's, again, without processing. With the processing. And that's good enough for right now. I don't want to do too much more just with anything in isolation for right now. We might add some EQ to this after the dynamics controlling to bring out certain aspects of it a little bit more. But for now, we're sitting pretty good with that kick drum. Snare drum. Let's see what this close mic sounds like. Sounds pretty all right. So I'm going to do this same trick with the resonant filter here on the snare drum. Just maybe a little bit less exaggerated there. But you can see we're getting rid of all this kind of mucky crap down there that we don't need for the snare drum sound. A lot of times on a snare drum with this close mic, you get this like weird kind of coffee mid-range thing that's happening. So you can hear that. So I'm just EQing a little bit out of that. You don't want to do too much cutting with that because it does ruin the character of the drum if you do that. But just to kind of compensate for the close miking, adding that little bit of cut in the mid-range. And the way I always do this to find it is I will just boost it up, max out your Q, and sweep the frequency to find where it sort of sounds the worst. It's right about there. And just a couple dB. Okay. And I always do subtractive EQ before my my dynamics processing, unless I'm going for a very specific effect. So the reason for that is because when you add a compressor, oops, I keep doing that. But when you add a compressor onto a signal, it kind of has a tendency to exaggerate problem frequencies. So like hi-hat bleed into the snare mic will get exaggerated by putting a compressor on there. So we have to be careful with what we're feeding into the compressor. So I'm just cutting out a little bit of extra mud stuff to tighten up the sound before it even goes into the compressor, because if the sound is loose and floppy before the compressor, it's going to continue to sound loose and floppy. So because there's so much cymbal bleed into this, and kick drum bleed actually, into this snare mic, we're also going to want to gate this so that we can heavily compress it. snare drum is actually pretty consistent on this song, so I'm not going to do my fast attack time compressor. I'm just going to do Spanky Guy. That's what I call the 1176 Spanky Guy. Okay. Whoa, that's a lot. Slowest attack, fastest release, just to start. Cool. Okay. And the reason that I'm using blue Spanky Guy on the snare drum and black Spanky Guy on the kick drum is because the blue version of this plugin is based on just a different revision of this analog compressor, and it adds a little bit more saturation, which I like. Low pass. No, I don't really like using low pass on snare and kick because it tends to like ruin the it ruins the transient response of the drum for one thing, so it kind of makes it sound a little bit dull, and I think it ruins the character. So I usually just like to use expanders instead of using low pass. Because I want to leave that high frequency content intact, because it just adds a nice like bit of air to the drums. So if I were to add in a low pass filter here, it just immediately sounds not as good to me. And you can hear it, like there's enough high mid and mid frequency stuff in the cymbal bleed that just doing this low pass doesn't really help us that much. Like that's when it starts to cut out the cymbal bleed, and we are losing a lot of detail from the snare drum. We might be able to do something like this. Again, using that resonant filter to kind of boost up where the snare drum needs the high frequencies and cut out where the cymbal bleed is. So I really like resonant filters. It's just one of my favorite things. But it's not on every single EQ. Like the default Pro Tools one doesn't have the resonant peak when you turn the Q all the way up. I still just don't like it. If you're going for a like more vintage and a more lo-fi drum sound, this technique will totally work. And there's nothing wrong with doing this. It's just for this song in particular, I kind of want like a big hi-fi sounding drum kit. There was another question. Do you do subtractive EQ on every track as well as the group mix? Yes, but I'm doing very different types of subtractive EQ. So on the individual tracks, the subtractive EQing I'm doing here is geared specifically towards the input that it's on. So I'm soloing the individual things so I can hear what I'm doing while I'm working on it. And the EQ that I'm doing here applies to only the snare top mic. I'm going to do different subtractive EQ on the snare bottom mic. So I don't want to do this on the mix group EQ over here. I have much simpler EQ over here. All I'm doing over here is subtractive EQ. Or sorry, filtering, essentially. You can kind of see this as your mix groups. The EQ on your mix groups is setting the overall boundaries for the frequencies that can come through with each instrument, and the individual track subtractive EQ that I'm doing is going to be specifically geared towards that input. Hopefully that clears that up. An easy drummer preset. A little bit. It sounds like the drum beat that everybody learns when they're starting out. And you're like, yeah, drumming is so cool. I can go doom do do gatu doom do do gatu doom do do gatu forever. Technically, the Led Zeppelin, what's that song? That drum beat, you know. Okay, let's talk about our snare bottom. This is good enough for the snare top for right now. Again, we have that bleed from the kick drum, but luckily no cymbal bleed. I'm just going to copy over my EQ from the snare top as a starting point. I don't really want the resonant filter on the snare bottom though, because I don't really need. I'm getting the low end that I want from the snare top mic and not the snare bottom. Still have that same boxiness though. So big ol' scoop down in the middle of the snare top here. Again, I just don't like that low pass because it just cuts out too much detail on here. We can probably just copy the same gate settings. Oh, input's a little bit quieter, so we have to adjust the threshold. And I'm actually going to increase the range on the snare drum because snare bottom. I don't really want to hear that like snare noise as the kick drum hits and activates the snare wires. And then what I'll do is I'll balance the level between the top and bottom mics. Okay, I feel like this needs a little bit of sparkle, good old-fashioned sparkle. So I'm going to add something that I would consider to be a character EQ, which not only adds the ability to shape the frequency response, but adds a little bit of distortion in there. So you can see this Soundtoys plugin has a drive knob. and it's always important to bounce back to your full immigrant song. Yes, thank you. Bounce back to your full mix after you've done a couple of these changes, just to make sure that what you're doing actually works within the context of the song that you're working on. You don't want to just go crazy and not pay attention to anything else in the song or how the changes that you're doing are fitting into the full mix. So it's always important to bounce back out. So again, one of the reasons why we have these groups set up over here, why we have the submixes, and why we have the mix groups is so that we have multiple levels of depth that we can look at our mix with. So I can solo the individual track. I can solo the group of instruments. Right? I can also solo just the drums and the bass to see how the low end relationship between the kick drum and the bass drum is doing. Right? So there's all these different layers from which of zooming in or zooming out on the mix that we can do because we've set up our mix like this. Okay, check if there's any other questions. Nope. But yeah, essentially what we've done is just tighten up the kick and the snare sound. So I'll play a little bit of the before and the after. Sounding good so far. These toms, I think, could sound a lot bigger. Right now, they feel kind of lame. I should check to make sure that I'm actually listening to the right thing. Again, this is just the complicated routing that I have to set up because of the stream. So this does not apply to you. Check. Mix 2, check. Okay, that's why I'm not listening to the right thing here. Okay, check. Hello. Check 1, 2. Okay, there is that. Okay, sorry. I just realized that I wasn't listening through my SonarWorks reference, so I wasn't really getting an even frequency response going on here. Okay, when you're working on toms can be kind of annoying because they don't play as consistently as the kick and the snare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight just this one drum fill while I'm working on these toms and make sure that I am set to loop playback mode. So just right click on the play button there, make sure it's in loop mode, and hit play. There is a ton of bleed in these tom mics, but one nice thing is that with the Weathervane session, they clearly edited out everything that wasn't a tom hit in the tom mics, which is nice. You'll see this in a lot of professional type of sessions if you get the opportunity to work on those. And it's quite nice to just like not have to deal with that. So I don't have to do any sort of gating because these already have everything that is not a tom hit edited out. You can see there's no waveform until the tom hits come in. But not every Weathervane session is like this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and work on this rack tom sound here. So there's that gross. Most close mics on drums will always have this like gross mid-range thing that just happens when you throw up a mic really close on something. So don't want to edit out too much of it though, because it does take away from, again, the like overall character of the drum sound. And then it's also good to not EQ things when they are super widely panned out like that, because then only one ear is hearing it, and you're not able to apply your full brain to it, essentially. And so I am going to do a low pass on the toms, though, because I don't really need as much snap out of these sounds as I do from the kick and the snare. So this is the drum sound we started with. This is what we end up with. So again, we're using that resonant filter technique to find where our fundamental frequency for this drum is and cut out everything below that, while at the same time increasing the sound of that fundamental note. Gives us that nice like big like ooh that we want. Then I'm also going to add a slappy guy on here to kind of like make the drum sound like it has more impact than it maybe naturally would. And so I'm trying to match the input and output level. Okay, and I'm just sweeping through different settings on this attack control, trying to find which one kind of adds the most nice slappy effect there. All right, let's move to the floor tom. Floor toms are a pain in the butt, so often they have lots of weird problems with them. Maybe too much resonant peak there. Right, so we don't need like ultimate monster low end on our floor tom, because the bass is going to have low end in it and the kick drum and all that kind of stuff. So okay, back in the full context, and let's listen to the full part here. sounds quite a bit better to me. So after before. A slappy guy goes on 4 times. Cool. No more questions so far. Okay. Before we move on to the overheads and drum room mics, I need to use the restroom really quick, so I'm going to take a quick break. Okay. Yeah, the snare should definitely sound a lot more punchy with this extra bit of compression in here. Like I said, the reason I call these guys slappy guys because they have this ability to add a fair bit of like fake transient information to the signal. They're pretty cool. They're some of my favorite plugins. Okay, now let's go on to the overheads. I'm just going to listen through these really quickly individually and see if there's anything that really needs individual attention. And if not, I'm just going to move on to processing them as a bus. Because there's like this mid-range resonance in there that's kind of like... but let's see if that's in the other mics too, because if so, we'll just take care of it all at once. There is kind of a fair bit of difference in terms of the resonances in both of those mics. Okay, so we're going to have to EQ all of these individually. Not a huge problem. Whoa. One thing to note is just like look at how much low frequency energy there is in this overhead. We don't really need low or sub information in the overheads that much because the close mics are going to capture that. At the same time, we don't want to completely cut everything out and make them sound, I don't know how to describe it. Like, we don't want to eliminate all the body of the instrument. So I'm just going to set this to like 100. And then this one has a mid-frequency resonance in there that's like, which sounds gross. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, that's a bit tighter. Good enough. What about this one? Copy this over, and then I think this is going to be a different frequency. Okay, so that's kind of in a similar range, but there is something higher up. Yeah. Just a little dip there. Okay, last overhead. Yeah, see this on the mono overhead, we have a lower resonance in there. And that's just because these mics are at different points in the room, so they're kind of naturally going to be sitting at different standing waves in the room, so that they'll kind of have like their own thing. But I'm not going to do anything other than that little bit of subtractive EQ on each one of the overheads. So I'm just going to move on to the full bus. And what I'm going to do here is add a compressed or EQ. So the overhead. And then I'm going to do like a really broad cut in the middle here. Broad and shallow. Oops. And then just a tiny, tiny boost in the high frequency range to kind of give a little bit of presence to the ride cymbal. And again, with the high pass filter there. You can see that even though like we have these high pass filters in, some of the the low frequencies still translate into the next stage. So that's why it's kind of good to have multiple stages of these high pass filters in there. So this is the overhead sound without all these EQs in, with the full drum kit. Almost makes a lot more room for the snare close mic to cut through and be a bit more punchy, which I like. So that's good. And then I often like to compress the overheads. I just want to try this plugin out because I was watching a video with the mixing engineer Eric Valentine, who is very cool, has mixed a lot of great records, and he was talking about how he uses this on overheads and really likes it. So I just want to experiment with it because it's fun. Basically, what this is like emulating like a channel strip and compressor from one of the like mixing consoles at Abbey Road Studios in London. I'm not usually a big fan of like location branded plugins, but these are actually pretty good. I'm also adding just a little bit of like presence and treble to the cymbal sound. Cool. That sounds cool. I like the way that kind of like brings out some of the texture from the overheads, having this compressor on there. This is kind of a weird compressor, so you can't really replicate this with the default plugin for Pro Tools. But if I were to try, I might do something. Where is it? Like this. Bit of a knee, because it's like a old school style thing, and then fairly fast attack. Medium slow release. Something a little bit like that. So it's fast attack time, medium slow release, a little bit of a knee, and a higher ratio to kind of get this like old school compressor limiter sound using the default thing. And if you're not picking up this like while we're doing the stream, that's totally fine. You can watch the stream later and pause when I'm setting these values for the compressor, just so you can copy those numbers and work with it a little bit. So now once I have my sound for the overheads kind of like dialed in, I won't really mess with these individual faders that much anymore. I will take a second to balance out the left and right and mono overhead levels just to kind of get a good sound dialed in. Cool. Feeling pretty good so far. Last set of mics is the drum room mics, and so we're going to do some subtractive EQ on these. Yeah, you can hear there's a lot of low end coming from the room mics, which we don't want. And there's like a And then I usually don't like my room mics to be overly bright, so typically I'll roll off some of the highs up there. Maybe not that much, but oops. Because otherwise it can just get kind of fatiguing if there's too much high frequency like cymbal noise coming in. Nope. Actually, I don't know why I didn't just put this. That was silly. Kept trying to adjust it and then copy it to the left or right channel when I could have just had this on the bus the whole time. So again, this is why you have the buses, to be able to add this processing on different levels. I was getting in the habit of doing it on the individual channels because there was a reason to, but with the room mics, there's not really right now in my session. There might be in yours. Okay, so what I'm going to do on the room mics here is I'm going to kind of make them a little bit crazy. So again, I'm going to take my slappy guy, and I'm going to shift this on the bluey into all buttons in mode, which is going to send the compressor into like crazy mode, which is just fun. So we'll hear what this sounds like. That's me bringing back in the reverb sends. Okay. So an hour later, we're done with the drums. Almost. I'm also going to put a bus compressor on the drum mix here. It's something that I've really liked to do most of the time. So what I do for my drum compressor is I use a emulation of the distressors, which you'll have available to you in the Champion Studio once you get in there. The hardware version of this, but they are incredible drum bus compressors. They're incredible for a lot of things, but for drum bus particularly. And let's do a parallel nuke. Yeah. Whoa. So our idea for the drum compressor, the drum bus compressor, is to add that excitement that I was talking about by like intentionally exaggerating the sound of the drums, essentially. So the parallel is because we have this mix control here, and it's down all the way, so we're getting both the dry signal and the super compressed signal. Let's jack the mix all the way up though, so we can hear. Oh, I had to bypass. That's why I wasn't showing us. So what I'm doing when I'm adjusting the attack and release time is just listening as I'm doing this to kind of get the right balance of slappiness and body to it. Okay, and now I'm going to slowly bring in the left and the dry signal by turning down the mix until I get kind of a balance that I like between the crazy crushed signal and the non-crushed signal. Let's see how it sounds in the full mix. So I could tell that the cymbals were being squashed just a little bit too much. So I'm turning down the mix on the overhead compressor. Okay. That feels pretty good for now. We might come back and do some more advanced stuff later. Let's check out the bass next, and then we'll go back and work on the balance between the bass and the drums. So the bass should be relatively simple, but it might not be that simple because even though it's a simple part and it's just two inputs, the bass is a complicated instrument. The bass takes up a lot of space in the frequency range, so it can be kind of tricky to work with. So let's just hear what it sounds like. Intonation on this bass is off. So it has a DI signal and an amp signal. First thing I'm going to do is there's some annoying like fret noise, stringy like picking noise on the amp. So I'm going to low pass the bass amp. Okay, and now I'm going to show you a fun little trick with bass that involves splitting essentially like creating a crossover for the bass so that you can process the low frequencies and the high frequencies separately. So the bass DI is what I'm going to do this with, and it's kind of similar to what we were doing with the MIDI Funk project, where you would duplicate a track and process the two different tracks differently, right? So that's pretty much exactly what we're going to do. We're going to duplicate the DI here. Like so. I'm going to rename these. So this is going to be bass DI low, bass DI high. Then I'm going to put filters on these. And the low one, I'm going to use a low pass filter, probably around like 300 hertz. 200. Yep. Maybe even lower. Yeah. And then we're going to put the reverse filter on the high. So 150. And then we can, if we want, steepen these curves, but it usually changes the phase relationship between the two cuts. So if we made these the steepest that they can go, that actually works pretty okay. I don't hear it. A lot of phase issue there. But it does create phase issues with the amp there. Interesting. Okay, that's a little bit better. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make the bass have a very consistent sound. We're going to put some pretty heavy compression on just the low section here. And this will kind of like glue the low end of the bass to one spot, essentially. Okay, and then I'm going to use Spanky Guy to add a little bit of spank to the high part of the bass here. So again, slow attack, fast release. how that sounds in the context. Right, and it's also nice because now I have control over how much of the low versus high frequency content of the bass to bring in at any point. Right, so this is what the bass sounds like normally in the context of the mix. So it kind of gets glued in there a little bit more. How could I tell there was phase cancellation on the bass? You can tell usually when you always want to check phase. So to check phase, you just invert the polarity in the plugin. And I could tell because as soon as I did that, it kind of changed the timbre of the bass and it cut out some of the heavy, low, mid information. So it like felt less strong essentially when I didn't have the phase flipped. And part of it is also just experience. Like I've done this several times, so I know that this commonly introduces phase issues. And I also have been doing this long enough that I kind of know the sound of like how something sounds when it's having phase cancellation issues. But for those of you who who can't just tell that, the way to tell it is just by soloing your instrument and then flipping the phase. So notice how that sounds like really hollow and weird versus, right? And you can even tell even more if you just solo one of them. Right, so you notice as soon as I solo this one too, the one that's supposed to like help reinforce the low end kind of dies out. Right. So yeah, I'll always make sure that you, when you're doing weird parallel processing like this, that you are checking your phase by inverting the polarity using these little phase flip buttons there. That's a good question, though. Cool. So I have those two elements feeling pretty good for me. I guess it's about time. If you have to go, feel free to go. I'm going to keep streaming, and you can just watch this later. I'm going to get as far as I can today, while also trying not to take like 3 hours. But we'll see what happens. I might tap out and finish it off tomorrow. But yeah, if you have to go, don't feel bad about going. I don't know who's trying to get into my personal meeting room. Anyways. Okay, now that we've got the drums and bass feeling pretty good, let's work on the vocals here and like how they sit with the drums and bass. Because to me, these are like three of the most important elements in a song. The drums take up the most space, frequency-wise and dynamic range-wise, and the bass is sort of like the foundation for the entire mix, especially in like modern rock and pop music. And then the vocal is the thing that people love and pay attention to most, right? So all these things kind of have to work together in tandem to make a really good sounding mix. So I'm actually going to mute the guitar and keyboard. Okay, I'm going to mute these, and I'm just going to work on the kind of like dry sound for the vocals, making it a little bit more consistent, making it feel more sparkly and more finished, essentially. So I'm going to replace this compressor with one that I usually like to use for this purpose. This is going to be my fast compressor. So same thing we did with the voiceover. We had a fast compressor and a slow compressor, right? So this first one is my fast compressor. Where is it? Doobly-doo. Space Cadet. There it is. Actually, no, that's not it. Spanky Guy. Again, Spanky Guy gets used a lot. But we're not going to use it in the Spanky Guy sense this time. We're going to use it with a really fast attack setting and a medium fast release time.
Close your lips, stop in your head, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard.
And we're going to go back to the beginning of that song where that really annoying phrase where the singer continually drops volume throughout the whole phrase. And we're going to loop this.
I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers. My friends in ink defend the way I think. I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers. My friends in ink defend the way I think.
So I like to use a higher ratio for this setting here. So I'm using the 4:1 ratio here. And I'm trying to get it to start compressing mostly just when the start of these phrases, when the singer sings really loud.
I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers.
Right, so on the quietest parts of the phrase, there's no gain reduction happening, but everything else, there's at least a little bit happening.
I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers. My friends in ink defend the way I think. I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers. My friends in ink defend the way.
Okay. Hold on, I keep getting emails. Okay.
I might not earn it. I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers. My friends in ink defend the way I think.
Okay, so that feels a lot better to me. Now I'm going to add my second compressor, my slow compressor, which I almost always use this LA2A emulation.
I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers. My friends in ink defend the way I think. I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers. My friends in ink defend the way I think. I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty paper.
Okay, so one of the cool things about doing vocal processing this way is that we can do a ton of gain reduction on the vocal without it sounding really overly compressed or unnaturally compressed, because we're having two different compressors do two different styles of work on it to get that total gain reduction. Like on the first one,
I might not earn it.
we have about 5 decibels of gain reduction.
I might not earn it, but it's what
And on the
I
second one, we have between 5 and 3 decibels of gain reduction. So that's like 8 to 10 decibels of gain reduction, which is quite a lot, but it doesn't sound like that much because we're splitting it up between two different processors like this. The LA2A is an optical compressor, so it tends to have a lot slower of an attack time and a more natural sound to it. So it's great for that application.
I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers. My friends in ink defend the way I think. I might not earn it, but it's what I deserve. I married hours in the dusty papers.
Okay. Now I want to also check what it sounds like later in the song.
Close your lips, stop in your head, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And
Okay. That's sounding pretty good to me so far. I'm going to copy these settings onto the vocal double.
close your lips, stop in your head, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
Okay.
Close your lips, stop in your head, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
Cool. So this lead vocal, actually, the capture sounds great. It sounds a little bit like they used some EQ on it already. So I don't think it really needs EQ. So I'm going to leave that.
Close your lips, stop in your head, 'cause I've
I'm going to bring in my room reverb there.
Close your lips, stop in your head, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
I might change the long reverb there in a second. But that's a good enough starting point there. This second lead vocal here, which is a double of the main take, I do want to do something a little bit special with. So I'm actually going to route this to the vocal stereo mix because I want this to be stereo. And I'm going to try a couple different things. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try using a stereo widening plugin. So this Soundtoys Microshift plugin is a plugin based on the Eventide harmonizer. I can't remember the model number, HN9000, whatever, something like that. It's a really cool plugin. And it's sort of like a chorus, but not quite. And it like automatically makes something that is mono feel much wider.
Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for...
So do you feel that difference where it sort of like moves more to the sides? So when we pair this with the main vocal...
Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
Right, so it just makes the lead vocal sound a lot wider. And I'm going to try and add just a touch of saturation to this secondary lead vocal here.
Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for...
So what this is doing is essentially like adding a little bit of saturation to the side channel of this lead vocal part, if that makes any sense, to just brighten it up and have it fill up a little bit more space. The mic that they used for this secondary, the lead vocal double, is a darker mic. It's a ribbon mic. So naturally it's not as bright and it kind of doesn't pull your ear to the side as much. But by adding this little bit of extra distortion, it brightens up the sound, and it overall just like helps thicken up the total vocal texture there.
Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your...
Okay, so this is no stereo widening and no distortion.
Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
Right? So that feels better to me. It just like takes up more space. It sounds cool. No, they're both close mics. The ribbon mic, the R44 one, is just a double. So it's the same take, but a different, or sorry, it's the same part, but a different performance, right? So it's like going for that effect of multiple people singing together in unison, but it's just the same person doing a second take of that vocal and then mixing those two things together. So it's not a room mic, but it is a different mic to kind of give a different texture to it.
Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need. Close your lips, stop when you're hit, 'cause I've heard your...
Okay, now I'm going to work on this long reverb here because this is sounding a little bit too muddy for me, and I kind of want to add some pre-delay to it to space it apart from the dry vocal here.
Close your lips, stopping your head.
So I'm going to switch to a different reverb plugin. Let's just use the default one to kind of get an idea for what we want for this. So I'm going to move my pre-delay out like 30 milliseconds.
Close your lips, stopping your head. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stopping your head. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
Okay, so that's kind of the sound that I want to go for. So like longish decay, some pre-delay on here, and kind of a hall reverb sound. I don't really like this plugin. It has a bunch of like high frequency kind of nastiness to it.
Close your lips, stopping your head. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
Okay, but that's kind of the general atmosphere that I want to go with for this big reverb here. But I'm going to switch the plugin to something that I like a little bit more. This is I have the Slate bundle, and this is one of the plugins that comes with it, and it has some really great things in here.
Close your lips, stopping your head. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stopping your head. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stopping your head. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them.
Okay, so I kind of like that. My mix might be a little too high, but that's fine. One pro tip for people is just that most professional mix engineers do have EQ after their reverb plugins on their reverb buses. Typically, like when you patch out to like if you're doing things analog, you would patch out to a reverb and then using the aux sends, and then before you patch back into the line returns on the mixing console, you would patch into an EQ. So you have reverb, then an EQ, and then back into the console so that you can control the frequency response, of the reverb. And it just gives you this whole another level of control and ability to shape the sound.
Close your lips, stopping your head. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stopping your head. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
I'm noticing that there's when the drums and bass and everything are in, there's a little bit too much low end in the vocals. So I'm going to cut that out actually before the compressor, just to kind of clean up some of that mud that's in there.
Close your lips, stop in your head, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop in your head, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all.
It's a cool bass line in the chorus. I didn't even realize that was there. I might want to emphasize that later. Cool. It's sounding pretty cool. I just want to experiment with some delay. So I'm going to create another bus here. Stereo, aux input, delay. Okay. Just because delay on vocals can sound really cool. And I'm going to use one of my favorite plugins, Outer Space. I like how, I've probably already talked about this, but space things are always like reverbs and delays, even though there would be no reverb in space. It just makes me laugh. Okay, so this is going to go out to the ETC mix. Input, I'm going to assign to an empty bus. I think 9 and 10 are empty now, because 5 is there and 7 and 8 is for something else. And I'm actually going to send my double to the delay here.
Close your lips, stop when you're here, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're here, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're here, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're here, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're here, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're here, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories.
Okay, I'm actually going to try and figure out what the tap tempo is. So tap tempo.
Close your lips, stop when you're here, 'cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all, and there's no need for excuses when I've heard your stories, I have
So
heard them all.
our about 102.5. Let's just round up to 103. Put that in as our session tempo there. And now if we go to sync. Whoa.
Stories I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're here. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. Close your lips, stop when you're here. 'Cause I've heard
Okay. So we've got a lot of space on the vocals now. Might be a little bit too much, but we can always dial back, you know. It's not that hard to just turn down our sends or turn down the effects returns.
Close your lips, stop when you're here. 'Cause I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. And there's no need for excuses. When I've heard your stories, I have heard them all. You ask for anywhere that's not your home. It's been a while since you left from the throne. I hear something, the street is quivering.
Cool. So that's my primary three elements kind of dialed in a little bit at least. And now I can start working on all of the extra fluff that is here. But yeah. For now, let's just kind of take a step back and just listen through the song and see what it sounds like so far. Okay. So I think it's sounding pretty good so far. I still have some notes. I think my ears are a little bit shot for right now, so I might pick this up later tonight or tomorrow. But for right now, before I do that, I'm going to update my notes here. So I don't know if I can. Oh, there we go. Check marks. I like that. Percussion is still really dry. We still need to deal with that. But we did these two things. Look at us. We're so accomplished. I have a couple more points, though. So the snare drum is a little flat sounding. I don't like that. Kick drum doesn't come through in full mix. At least the attack of it doesn't really cut through. I think that's kind of it for the two notes. I think spacey section at the end needs cool vocal effects. So we'll kind of mess around with that when we get there. But yeah. So we got a big list of things to do, but we've got a good start. But yeah, I think for right now, I need to take a break. I'll let you know when I start streaming again, or you can just watch it on YouTube after the fact. And yeah, don't feel weird about emailing me to ask questions about what I've done today, because I'm happy to respond or just address it in the next stream. Okay, yeah, I'll talk to y'all later. Make sure to save. Yeah, bye for now.